What if no one was right or wrong? What if we can just all have compassion and know that everybody's making their choices because of their story? What is your story instead? Instead of you're wrong, I'm right, like what is your story? And what is my story? The more you have that compassion for yourself and give yourself grace, because that's something else we don't do, the more you're going to be able to do it for someone else. And you can tap into more of that consistent feeling of love and productivity and connection and creation with the world. Because when you're feeling those feelings, you actually raise your consciousness up, and that is when you actually can attract the things that you really desire into your life.
Hi, I'm Blake Schofield, founder and CEO of The Bridge to Fulfillment. Mom to 3, USA Today top 10 professional coach, and former corporate executive who got tired of sacrificing my life for a comfortable paycheck. My mission is to expand perspectives to achieve greater impact at home and work without sacrifice. This is The Bridge to Fulfillment. On today's episode of The Bridge to Fulfillment, I welcome Dr. Karin Luise. She's an award-winning author, speaker, master life coach, soul guide, and course creator with a PhD in counseling and education. She blends 20 years of practice and research with her spiritual gifts to guide people through mind-blowing transformations. She's obsessed with helping people release the programming of their past, remember who they are, and tap into the power and purpose that they are here to enjoy in all levels of their lives, while having the time of their lives. Her retreats have brought healing and transformation to hundreds of men and women ready to live their purpose. I can't tell you what a joyful conversation this was. We have so much in common, and what I often find is there's consistency in truth. While we may use different words and may have arrived at the same conclusions in different ways, I think that this conversation will be incredibly powerful for you. In fact, honestly, there was so much jam-packed in this. This might be one of the most impactful podcasts that I've done, in that if you will allow yourself to slow down the podcast or come back and listen to it again, you will very likely find even new lessons, new learnings, and new things to apply to your life. This was truly a free-flow conversation, and with that, I trust that the right message will make its way to you today. So thanks for listening, and without further ado, here's our interview. I'm so excited, Karin. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Bridge to Fulfillment.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see where our conversation takes us. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we just get started? Can you share a little bit about your background, who you are, and how you found the path that you're on now?
I am a kind of a reformed therapist. I started off being an educator. I was an early childhood major for my undergrad, and then through some life events, which specifically was a big divorce that kind of pulled the rug out from under me, I decided that I wanted to understand why people were built the way they were. It was a really kind of traumatic separation, and divorce was very public. I was married to a professional athlete here in Atlanta, and I went through this very life-changing experience that didn't match kind of the way that I was raised and what I expected to happen. You know, we all have this like A to B, like, oh, I'm going to get this degree. I'm going to get married here, have these kids. I thought I was going to have like 3 kids and 2 golden retrievers by the time I was 25. And, you know, then this whole thing ended up erupting, and I wanted to understand like, how can people, what's the psychology behind trauma, and specifically infidelity and trauma? And so I went back to graduate school and got my master's in counseling. And then I ended up loving it. And I had no plan out of my undergrad to go back to school at all. I actually, not at all. Like I wasn't wired that way. I was going to be a teacher. I was going to be a baseball wife, and I was going to be a mom. Like that's where I was headed. And I ended up really loving research and academia. And so I went and got into a PhD program and ended up getting my PhD in counseling and education and doing a lot of research around trauma, infidelity. I studied a lot of addictions. I studied a lot about just divorce recovery in general, and really wanted to understand how people find meaning in life and what makes them feel better. I mean, it's that simple, but the complexity of it is really what we all want. We all want to feel better, like in every layer of who we are. So I wanted to understand some of the factors that really helped with that. And so I dedicated several years to research, and I taught at the university level. And then I ended up working at a hospital, and then I worked in private practice. And then I ended up going through some really personal, additional traumatic events later on. I got remarried again, and some other I lost someone very, very close to me to a very traumatic death. And I ended up having the lid blown off in an even bigger way in my life. And so it ended up opening me to a very spiritual kind of realm, a very spiritual way of looking at things, a different way than just honing in on this very 3D logical matrix that we're all in. And really kind of my soul was just pulling me to like pull up and out and look at things maybe with a different lens that was looking at more of the way the spirit was guiding us through life. My mom was a pastor, so I had this really religious background, but I ended up then studying a lot of spiritual modalities for healing. And now I'm doing a lot of my own research on just what kind of is getting in people's way of their happiness. And I'll tell you, what I'm finding now is people are not feeling connected to who they are. I put out this free soul inventory quiz, really just like to try to get more people and I'm like, oh my gosh, this research is phenomenal. What I'm finding, I mean, thousands of people all over the world are taking it. And I can tell you, most people are not in alignment with who they are, and they're not in a place of joy, and they're not making time. And I know you have a lot of go-getters and type A's that listen to your podcast, but the disconnection from our joy, from giving ourselves permission to find space, to enjoy life, to bring adventure and expansion is really, really missing. And it's coming up in my research in a really big way now. So that's where I am today.
So good. You are literally right in my lane. So dive into that in a big way, because alignment is really the gift that I bring to the world. And really being able to see truly who people are, what their purpose here is, and stripping away the misalignment, the friction, the trauma, the belief systems, all the stuff that's in their way. One of the things that's really been put on my heart lately from God is that almost none of us feel seen. And we're looking for the world to see us. But until we really see ourselves, we'll never have that validation, and we'll never be able to fully see other people either. And so I think this is going to be a beautiful discussion. So I'm going to table that for a hot second and come back to it, because I think we have a lot to talk about. But I would love to hit on something you started with, because I think it's important. And there are a lot of people that go through this. What I have found consistently is when we go on a transformation journey, for many of us, it starts with, Oprah Winfrey says, there's an old quote that she talks about that first it's a whisper, then it's a knock on the door, then it's a bang, then the whole damn house burns down.
Oh, yeah.
And certainly my transformational journey was the same, although mine really started with my career and just getting to a place where I physically could not do it one more day. I often say when you stay in misalignment, it's a matter of if not when, you will have your breakdown moments. And that's clearly what happened for you. You shared that, your divorce was really a shock to you. I think that happens to a lot of people. Looking back, what do you feel like you missed or you were living in that it was so shocking that it was a burning down of the house?
I was young. So to be specific, because if anyone looks me up, they'll find this out. I've actually now been divorced twice. So I've been through it in two different capacities. And I think that what I missed was, and this is something that I always want to talk about, is listening to my own intuition. And I missed that I had to follow these rules, and that if I checked the boxes, that things were going to turn out in a way that was positive. Like if I was the good Christian wife, and if I was doing this, and if I was raising my husband up, and I was kind of just in a supporting role, that things would turn out very, very well for me. And it does for a lot of people. It's not that that's wrong. It's not that at all. But there was a lot of messages that were coming in that were trying to tell me, the whispers, what the truth was. And, I really thought that once you say I do, like it's till death do you part. And I think that's a beautiful and wonderful thing when it happens. But sometimes, speaking of alignment, relationships go out of alignment. And at the time, I didn't understand. My first divorce was now 23 years ago. I did not know that I could change my mind. I did not know that I could step out of that situation because it was out of alignment with me. Like, I didn't know nearly what I know now, of course, because I have decades of perspective and reflection. And I did it again a second time, but I have 3 kids now out of my second marriage. It was very different. But the common theme, though, was, can I change my mind? And the fear of being judged, and the fear of, oh my God, doing this by myself. I didn't feel capable of going out, because I got married the first time right out of college. Like that was like all of my 20s. And I had no idea how to make it on my own. I mean, it was my identity. So I didn't realize I could have a different identity. So that was the catastrophe in my life, because research shows that men identify through their jobs. This is speaking generally, the way anthropologically that we're wired. Men tend to identify through their jobs, and we tend to identify through our relationships. So when relationships shatter, and that is your identity, who you are shatters, or that's what I experienced. It was like a complete deconstruction of self. And so then when I got back up on my feet, and 6 years later, I finally got married again, I wanted to have kids. I was like, clock is ticking. I had my kids when I was 38 and 39 years old, twins and then one. And we were not in alignment at all. It was one of those situations where I was just like, I have to, like, you checked all the boxes, but my intuition the whole time was like, okay, like this on paper looks really good, but the meat of that relationship was not there. And so the alignment piece in relationship, which is, I think, what a lot of people that are really driven miss, and this tends to be my niche population too, is women that are really focused on getting out there. Like women that go through trauma when they're children tend to be badasses when they grow up. I mean, there's a lot type A, like you transform that, like, oh no, you're not going to mess with me, and I'm going to make it on my own, especially people that have father loss. I wrote a book called The Fatherless Daughter Project, did a lot of research on father loss and repeating patterns. But my point is, we tend to step into roles for ourselves where if the world leaves us or abandons us or betrays us or traumatizes us, we'll be damned if we're not going to make it on our own. And then what happens is we end up misaligning our relationships because we end up going really into our masculine, and we don't allow for maybe the potential of alignment the way that we can get once we find healing. And I know I'm unloading like a lot in this answer, but I miss that. I have it now, and it's what I teach now. And I kind of chose to go through all of it to get me there. But my perspective now, at the end of the day, honest to God, it's self-love, it's worthiness, it's value outside of whatever award or whatever society or your job or whatever is going to give you. But it's a matter of like, what worthiness do you really have inside of yourself to give yourself a chance to sit back and allow joy to come into your life, allow your needs to be met instead of you always meeting everybody else's. So, I mean, there's so many places we can go for that. But at the end of the day, what I always find, always with my clients, again, these are strong women, it always comes down to like self-love on a very deep level that is feeling pretty empty. Because I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much that you shared. I'm like, oh, so much to unpack. And I guess there are two things that really stood out to me is like, let's talk about this, because my perspective and what my learning has been, and I knew this since I was really young, because I knew at probably 7 that I had a significant calling on my life. And I just didn't know what that meant. But I had always been focused on living a purposeful life and people really understanding why they're here and what they're here to do. And what I've consistently seen is you keep getting the lesson until you learn it. And we choose those lessons that we need to learn to grow. And I think so many people don't understand that.
Yeah.
And the 2 lessons you just talked about are 2 lessons I also had to go through. Well, you talked about more than 2, and actually everything you talked about for the most part, I've had to go through. But there are 2 that I think are really important to hit because I see them being huge barriers for people. This belief system that if I make a decision, I have to hold to it and I cannot change my mind. I was literally just talking to my community yesterday about this. There's a book by Seth Godin called The Dip, which is a beautiful book. I'm not sure if you read it.
I haven't, but I love him. Yeah.
Oh, so good. It's like 97 pages. And he talks about when to quit and when to stick. And he talks about that as a society, we have been taught not to quit, that we think that teaches us grit and resilience. But the people that are truly successful quit everything that they can't be best in the world at. They quit everything that they look at and say, I'm in a cul-de-sac, meaning it's not going to get better. It's not necessarily going to get worse. It's just a loop. Or the things that are really draining them, even if they're good at it, or even if it used to be good. And the commentary I had with my group yesterday was this. If you were running a business and your business was to buy, say, handbags and belts, and you bought 50% handbags and 50% belts because that's what you thought people would buy. And then actually sales came in and 90% of your sales were in handbags and only 10% were in belts. You would immediately look at that and say, oh my goodness, I need to readjust. I need to get out of these belts and I need to buy more handbags so I can be successful. It becomes a very simple, obvious answer that there's adjustment that needs to be made. New data came in. The data told me my original assumptions were wrong. I need to change it. When we look at our personal lives, our relationships, we never look at it that way. And I think ultimately that's the problem, because we've been taught, well, I make a commitment and that commitment is forever. But we actually don't understand or look at it and say, is this a healthy commitment? Is it still in alignment? What does need to change? And I'm not advocating that we just quit everything or we don't look at it, we don't have the conversations. But what I often find is that we are so stuck in the belief system that it's terrible or bad or we're horrible people if we change. But if you look at every other facet of life, it would tell you that success means I take in new data and I adjust and adapt. And for most of my life, I did not do that. And so I suffered many slings and arrows, just like what you're talking about, because I believed so much in loyalty and commitment in my word, as opposed to understanding that we can make agreements from a place of what is best and from a place of adaptation, as opposed to assuming that that is contractual forever. And I think often too, we end up in relationships that are unhealthy because we just assume, well, we made a contract, so that's just it. And then we stop putting in the effort. We stop looking at what needs to adapt and change, and we stop taking care of what's necessary for success. So I appreciate you saying that, because I think that lesson is so important. And I'm often shocked by how many women I talk to feel shame around divorce.
Oh my God. Well, in my sharing, I simplified this in sentences. So we're talking decades each time. Like this, it was not simple, and it is not, there's so many layers, but once you get it, like the ahas that you have and the ahas that I have, the struggle and the shame, and of course, and being divorced twice, I taught Sunday school. I was like a relationship expert with a doctorate on the internet. Like, how could I get divorced? And I was so, living on opposite sides of the house. And so there are some reframes for words when I'm working with people now because this is what's helped me. It's like the contract and the obligation. What I see play out is when it feels like obligation. So I start to look at like energetics, and you can just say the way that you feel in your body. How do you feel? Your body is always going to tell you. And one of the things that women do is we'll manifest sickness in our bodies. When things are out of alignment and we're staying in a place, whether it's a job or a relationship that is out of alignment, you see it and you're over and over and over, often gut issues, a lot of prolonged sickness. I used to get constant bronchitis because in my second marriage, there were 20 topics I wasn't allowed to talk about. I couldn't talk about my past. I couldn't address I'd ever been married. I literally I was always walking on eggshells, and I see this. And I'm a smart girl. Like it just like the rules just kept coming and coming. And so I contracted, I was shutting down my throat, and there's a thing called chakras in your body, and you have a throat chakra. It's just an energy center. And so oftentimes whatever energy center you're shutting down, it will manifest sickness. That's Louise Hay that started Hay House, did all this work on this. And so, your body's very literal about when it gets sick, what's happening. So I literally got laryngitis for years and bronchitis. And now looking back, I didn't know it at the time, but I was not giving myself permission to speak, and I was staying because of obligation. Now I look at responsibility, I look at integrity, and it's like, what is going to be what we don't get raised to say to ourselves is, what do you really want? Not what am I supposed to do, or what does the Bible say, or what does the professor tell you? This is the question I ask myself most often, whether it's where do I want to go to dinner? Simple to the most complex. What do you really want? And then I'll put myself in a future situation based on each decision, each option, and I'll check in with my body. Now, this has taken practice to understand this, but what I've learned is when you're staying in a situation out of obligation because you're under contract, and I'm simplifying this. I know it's not simple. I want to say that it's not simple. I just want to support you and help you to understand. When you're staying in obligation and you check in with your gut, so you have brain cells in your gut. Now, I can look at energetically, but I will tell you medically, you have brain cells in your gut. That's why it's called the second brain. It will contract. This is kind of your spirit center. It's where your solar plexus is, your soul. And I'm pointing right below my rib cage. That area right there, your gut will tell you if you really want to be there or not. Now, sometimes, and I separate responsibility out too. Like sometimes being responsible for things and staying, like the days you kind of want to run down the street and leave your kids because you're like, you've about had it, right? Like, that's not going to make you feel good in the long run. That's an obligation, but over time, you're going to feel good when you stay. You can go and have your your moment, but that kind of obligation, you're going to feel good staying. I'm talking about when you're in a moment and I'm staying out of this obligation because I can't change my mind, is making my gut so sick. I had so many GI issues. This manifests with women so much. And so I started learning how to I got support. I went to advisors that could, like you addressed in the beginning, that could see me and hear me and that wouldn't judge me. If there was no judgment in the world, what choice would I make? And it took me years to decide. But once I liberated myself, and I just read this in a podcast, in a blog yesterday, my nanny, we were standing in my kitchen one day and she had seen this play out for a couple of years, living on opposite sides, of the house. Like we were at the country club showing up, like everything's perfect. And a lot of people can relate to this. And then I know because I've been a therapist, I'm now a coach. Women tell me there are issues and I hear this so much. We'd go home and we would just walk to opposite sides of the house, disregard each other. And one day my nanny, she'd watched this go on for a year and a half and I was complaining in the kitchen. This is back in 2014. And she just looked at me and just flat out said, Karin, you could be miserable the rest of your life or you could just leave. And then she walked out. Like I stood there like, did my nanny literally just give me permission? And she was a Christian. And I was like, in that moment, like that was one of those aha, like moments where I was like, I can leave. Like, wait.
Can we talk about this? Because you said something really clear, right? I've been raised with a Christian background as well. The highest commandment is to love one another, right? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And you said something, and this has been something really ruminating with me, I've been sharing. This is where we misunderstand things in a really significant way from the way I see it and what I've been shown over and over again. You said the highest thing you can do is love yourself. Yeah. That is exactly what I have come to know to be true. So when we say love your neighbor as yourself, most of us assume that means self-sacrifice. Let me do all these things for these other people. However,
I think it means instead of yourself,
I'm a terrible person. I should be better. I did this awful. And we are our own worst critic. And we are literally every day beating ourselves up in ways of which we would never do to someone else. Then we cannot wholly love our neighbor. We cannot wholly see them. We cannot offer our best to them because we are not whole.
Yeah.
And I think this is such a place where we really misunderstand this, that actually healing yourself, becoming fully whole, loving yourself enables you to show up and truly love your neighbor in such a significant way. And when you said to me this thing of she gave you permission and you stopped and you said to yourself, if there was no judgment in the world, what would I do? Well, what did Jesus do? He came to the world with absolutely no judgment. He loved every single person for exactly who they were, despite every flaw, despite every sin, despite whatever it was the rest of the world felt. And so I think there's something really poignant and powerful in that, especially because, like I said, it's been really on my heart and something that I feel like God has really been showing me a lot through this journey is when you live your life for everyone else, when you live your life based on fear, doubt, anxiety, shame, guilt, those are all things that are not of God. And if you truly look at and understand the Bible and what Jesus was teaching us, it was true unconditional love for yourself and for everyone else. And so if you can come from that place where you can truly love yourself and recognize that God puts your desires and dreams into you, that his job really is to prosper and not harm you, that you can really surrender almost, everything to him. Most of the belief systems and decision-making, stress, anxiety, things that we go through, we are creating the sin, we are creating the suffering that's completely unnecessary because we don't actually really understand what the lesson is.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I'm here with a mission to correct a lot of the misteachings as well, because this self-sacrificing thing is not what Jesus taught at all. And when you look at the original text, let's just mention that the Bible was written in a whole different language and it's been reinterpreted and a lot of it's been taken out, a lot of it's been changed. And Jesus, there's no one, when you get to heaven, nobody's asking you how many times you were divorced, engaged, separated. It's really irrelevant. It's how did you interact with people? How did you take responsibility for your life? And that self-love piece is everything. Jesus, he says that we're all sons and daughters. He actually never said I'm the only one, by the way. He actually was very much more about we are all, and you can tap into that source within you. You have it in yourselves. You're not separate from it. And that's the piece that is actually the hell on earth that people live with, which is the separation from source. I call God source now, but from God within you. And, Bronnie Ware did research called Top Regrets of the Dying. And this is documented research. The top regret of people in hospice was that they lived their life for everyone except for themselves. And it is, I can't tell you, so it's grounded in research. And That was not what Jesus was here to teach. It wasn't to sacrifice your life, because that joy, you have that, you are made, you're divine, you're sacred. And if you're not giving yourself and acknowledging, just, I love how you just said it, your desires are coming through you because they're sacred. And if you think everyone else's desires are sacred, you're within more sacred than yours instead of you, you're not honoring the life force within you. And this is the core of what I'm teaching too. I love it. You're having the aha moments. And I'm like, but I didn't get it I went through all this trauma until now. And once I got it, the liberation where I'm like, and I get to teach my kids now, what do you want? Like, what do you want? I'm here to guide you. But what do you want? I'm here to let your light shine and you, that desire within you. And sometimes a relationship runs out of alignment. And you know it when both parties aren't willing to do the work. You know it when you're not, you literally are repellent. You know it when I remember finding something that Jesus said, which was do all you can do and then do no more. Like, then do no more. It's okay. And the word I'm going to say instead of quit is just release. If that's meant for you and that person wants to mend the relationship and mend whatever happened, they will do their work and you will find each other again. Like, if it's meant for you, it's not going to leave your life. If something goes out of alignment with you, you will feel it in your body, and you have the choice. And I'm not advocating divorce ever. Of course, I would love to have married my high school sweetheart and stayed married forever. That would have been amazing. It's not the journey my soul chose. But if this is resonating with you and you're feeling it, I would say get the support from someone that's been there, that understands that, where there's no shame, where you can be seen and heard outside of all the rules, and where you are truly looking at, like, am I in alignment here anymore? And it's, you know what? It's okay if the job, the hometown, the relationship are no longer in alignment with you. This right now, we're seeing it like collectively. If you're going through, if this is resonating with you, you are part of the shift that's happened because of what's happened. And I know we're not going to go into it, but the shift that's happened collectively is happening for each one of us on an individual level. Those of us that really want to be in a place of purpose and calling and something bigger in life. And if you've been in a situation that no longer, and this is what I hear women say all the time, I just don't feel like myself there anymore. Like, I don't, whatever that is, whatever environment that is, if you are not feeling like you can be, or that you are yourself, you don't even know who you are in that role anymore, then it's no longer in alignment with you. And it's okay to start taking the steps and just ask in prayer to be guided.
Oh, that's so good. And I would say, in addition to that, we often think that growth is bad because we don't understand that everything is cycles of creation, destruction, and rebirth. One of my favorite quotes is, most people prefer the certainty of misery to the misery of uncertainty. And I think one of the greatest blessings that I have gotten through this journey as someone who used to be type A, have to plan everything out, is that the unexpected is actually God's gift. That's often far better than anything we could have ever planned. And when we begin to learn that the things we've placed certainty on, our identity, our relationships, our money, our home, our children, are ever changing, because that's the only thing that's consistent. And from my perspective, the only thing that you really know for sure is that there is a God. Almost everything else besides there's a God and one day your body will die. Everything else, you can't bank certainty on. And I think when we talk about that, we're in a place of massive change as a society. I feel and know that viscerally as you're talking about. It's important to begin to learn to understand how to embrace uncertainty, that uncertainty is possibility, that uncertainty is growth, that uncertainty, when in alignment, will be the best thing that's ever happened to you. And as a society, we have so many people struggling with feeling disconnected, mental health, depression, not feeling seen. And we're putting so many Band-Aids on it rather than addressing the root cause, that we are all actually connected. And it's our belief system that we're separate. Yep. It's our belief system that there's something broken or wrong with us. It's the way that we are going through life, avoiding and distracting, as opposed to actually learning how to connect to ourselves, love ourselves. Because when we connect and love ourselves, to your point, we're connected to God, we're connected to one another. All of a sudden, everything shifts. And you go from this place of uncertainty, fear, being alone, feeling disconnected, to the exact opposite. But to me, when it happened to me, it was like 1,000 times. Like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine that this was possible for my life. Like, is this I feel like, is this a fairy tale? Is this even possible? And it's because we've been gifted these beautiful directions for our life. And as little children, I think we're told that we're a dreamer, it's not possible. And we start being conditioned about what life should be like. So I love the fact that your journey has taught you that, you're teaching your children that. And certainly that's the work I'm doing as well. And I just hope that we can be a lighthouse to those that are behind us in the journey, and not from a judgment standpoint, but just meaning you are learning the lessons, you are removing the trauma, you are beginning to explore what's really possible for you.
Yeah, it connects you to limitless. And it is true. I was just talking about that yesterday, that the fear of the unknown is what people fear the most, besides death and public speaking and being abandoned and doing it wrong, getting it wrong. And that's why I work on training women, particularly men too, but I specifically work with women, how to tune in to that intuitive center and how to learn how to be guided internally instead of externally. And it does break those rules, right? But that's that alignment piece, because when we're doing things that are out of alignment with us, even if I know, because your story's about you have the big paycheck, you have the big title, and you have all of it. But if it's not in alignment with who you are, you're going to feel it. That's why I keep telling you this. Look at just pay attention to your gut. Are you constantly are your shoulders and your neck? We hold a lot of tension in our jaw and our neck and our shoulders, and all of that tension. If you're not feeling supported, that's where the back problems come from. And the body's telling you, we're out of alignment with feeling really supported in our life. And that support comes from authentically doing what you desire. And not to simplify that it's the easiest thing, but the journey is us remembering who we are and coming into an alignment with who we are. And not everyone is going to, we're all going to choose different paths. But the way that you will know when you come into alignment is it will feel like relief, and then it'll feel like liberation. Because, when we release those things that don't serve us anymore, and the question's always, it's like that Marie Kondo question, does it bring you joy? Does it bring you joy? Because at the end of your life, you're going to look back and you may have martyred your whole life for somebody else and they were just fine, but you literally just gave your life away to keep somebody happy. And I mean, I guess in an old kind Christian way, like I was taught, like that sacrifice is somehow Christ-like, but you have your life. We're here to do this together and to dance in a reciprocal relationship where we're meeting each other's needs and we're lifting each other up and listening and seeing. And I love that you're bringing up separation, because once you get that, it's like, and there's so much that's happening in the world right now that is actually trying to separate us. And so no matter where you believe, I'm always trying to bring, and I do this with my kids. I'm like, well, what if there was no right and wrong? Like, what if no one was right or wrong? What if we can just all have compassion and know that everybody's making their choices because of their story? What is your story instead of you're wrong, I'm right? Like, what is your story? And what is my story? And so you said this earlier, like the more you have that compassion for yourself and give yourself grace, because that's something else we don't do, the more you're going to be able to do it for someone else. And what happens then is you're actually raising your consciousness, and you can tap into more of that consistent feeling of love and productivity and connection and creation with the world. Because when you're feeling those feelings, you actually raise your consciousness up. And that is when you actually can attract the things that you really desire into your life, because you're more in alignment. And that's where that flow comes. I mean, it happens 100% of the time. But the more you're sticking to and gripping those things and you're just trying to shove that square peg in that round hole. I know, we've all done it, because you feel like you're supposed to. You're just going to feel that jagged feeling inside your gut, and you're never going to feel in flow. You're just going to feel like you're checking boxes, and it's not going to feel authentic and in flow for you.
I had so many health problems, and I think this is a place that, having done this work, I know 100% what you're sharing to be true, experienced it personally, have helped so many people work through it, that when you consistently are having health problems, that is your body telling you, stop and listen, something's not right. I've been able to resolve pretty much all of the problems, and I had very significant problems for decades, health-wise. You said two things I wrote down because they're so powerful, right? You're literally giving your life away. I think we often don't see this as women, we've been taught inaccurately that is the way to do things. Men do this too, but goodness gracious, culturally, women are constantly told that. And then we wonder why women are struggling so much, right? It's time to be able to see and stop teaching our children that when you get married or you have children, that your life now becomes everyone else. Because how unfair is that to your children, that they are now, quote unquote, responsible for your unhappiness? I don't think we think about that as parents, but that's what you're teaching them. And you're teaching your daughter, hey, stay with this person out of obligation, even though you're absolutely miserable. And hey, give away your entire life to your children and you no longer exist. Like, we don't really stop and understand culturally, what are we teaching?
Yeah.
And then why do we have generations of these problems? But the beautiful thing is we're entering a place where we can now see it differently, and we can learn differently, and we can change the dynamics of what our children and our grandchildren and future generations are going to do. You also said, what is your story? I love that so much. Isn't that really what this is about? My youngest son, we put in private school last year. He's very gifted and an entrepreneur, disruptor, creative, really doesn't need the roles in a traditional school. And they talk about helping you go on a hero's journey. Yeah. Well, isn't that that's really what this is? What is your story? And if you haven't defined that and you don't know, or you haven't been living that way, maybe today is your opportunity to rise up and recognize that you do have a journey. You chose a journey and a path and a purpose and lessons to learn. And if you're feeling like you're not growing and you're feeling like you're in Groundhog's Day, it's a call to rise up and take action. There is one tool I really love that I got from my time as a CCA advisor. It's called the investor frame. So anytime you're in a situation where either a new thing comes to you that's unknown, or you're unfulfilled or unhappy in your circumstance, you can ask yourself this: given what I know today, would I enter in this same relationship or agreement? And that answer is going to be very clear if you listen to your gut. And if it's anything other than a hell yes, then you can stop and say, okay, in order for it to be a yes or a hell yes, what would have to change? And I think this is such a simple and beautiful process. Thank you, Dan Nicholson, Nick Peterson, and Randy Massengale for this, because it's so powerful when you can stop and ask yourself that. And if your answer is hell no, and then you go through the list and you're really honest, are these things that are changeable or not? And how much time, energy, and effort would it take to make it changeable? And am I willing to do that? Is the other party willing to do that? It's a very simple way to take that inner compass and put some data behind it so that you are very clear. And I think for so many people, you know, if I had sat and gone through that in my corporate job when I was going through the cycles of changing jobs, hoping it would be better, it was like, would I have opted into this if I knew this is what it was going to be? 70-hour work weeks and all of this? No, I would not have. And what would have had to have changed? And it was fairly significant, including all the way down to, I felt like I was just helping people buy more stuff. And it really did not align with my value system that if I died at the end of the day, I made companies millions of dollars. But what impact did I really make? Because people were buying clothes to feel better, but it was a Band-Aid. And so I just think there's been so much powerful conversation today. I mean, we probably just put out 40 different messages.
Oh, I want to add on one thing that's coming up from what you just said. And this is just something I'm always saying, like, so that awareness that you have, and I love that exercise. Women tend to guilt themselves then, and men do it too, again, but the looking back then and then saying, I wish I wouldn't have, or I wish I would have changed. Like, so when you have that awareness, be really aware not to go back then and feel like all that regret and shame about the decision that you made. I always say, don't judge your past self with your current knowledge. So remember, you've had, like you said, you've had the years to go through and get the reflection, just like me, out of all my stuff. You have current knowledge now that you didn't have at the time. You're always making decisions that based on your current feelings, your current resources, your current beliefs, right? But when you know better, that's Maya Angelou, when you know better, you can do better. And so now that you know this, your awareness, like, you're responsible for that. And it's like, well, if you're staying in a situation, I'm all about like self-responsibility now. It's like, you now know from listening to this, if you're still hanging in here and your earbuds are still tapped into those ear holes, you are aware now that whatever it is that's kept you listening, like, there's something that's out of alignment. And I love what you said. You just walked them through. Are there steps to change that can reform that situation to come into alignment with you? Or is it maybe one of those situations that you can change your mind on and release with love and compassion and make a pivot, even to the unknown? Because you know what's so cool? And we get so afraid, but unknown means that you can literally create what you want. And I love the statement too. And I'm going to add the word what to it, because there's a statement that says you don't know who and what. You still haven't met everyone that's going to love you. I'm going to add, you still haven't met everyone and everything that's going to love you, because it could be a job. It could be a new source of income. It could be a new, whatever it is for you. it's not static. Like you don't know, because the more you stay in that situation, you have an open space in your life for that new thing to find its way to you that's more in alignment with you. So trusting, being in faith and understanding that you have such an extraordinary guidance system within you, and you don't have to go to others for approval or validation. If that has been knocking at your door for years, and for most people it has, you actually already know the answer. We're just giving you permission.
I love it. I often say you cannot receive when your hands are full. And that is often one of the biggest things is we overthink, we're overscheduled, and we're overworking. And we aren't getting what we want, but we're holding on to the things that are actually physically weighing us down. I love that you hit on the guilt and shame. I think that's super powerful. What I've really seen in my journey is that everything is perfect as it is.
Yeah.
If people could truly understand the intricacy of how everything is built and how you're constantly supported, we would have far less stress or anxiety. And so these moments when I should have known, I should have done it differently. This goes back to what I said before, which is that is a lack of self-love. It's a lack of trust. And it's honestly a belief that you know better than God does. That's really what I've come to see. It's like when I sit there and beat myself up for all of that, well, if truly God is here to support you and you truly have faith in that and you're surrendering, then isn't it perfect exactly as it is? Aren't you learning the lesson in the moment you're supposed to learn it in order to be able to get you to what's next? And often I have people say to me, I wish I had your level of faith.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that I have been where you are. I have walked all of that journey. Yeah. And the way for me to have developed this level of faith was to walk through the fire. It was to listen to my inner compass when I was misaligned. It was to invest in myself and finding the people who could help me. And it was to be willing to challenge the fears that were standing in my life that were the lies. And every time I walked through and I chose to let go of the thing that wasn't serving me, something beautiful came and replaced it. And my level of faith increased. And I could just see time after time after time in retrospect how everything had been given to me and how either I hadn't seen it, I had assumed it was a coincidence, or at the times when I had overridden the information, how that had caused me pain and suffering unnecessarily. And so I would just encourage you, if today you are feeling really called to make a change and you're hearing this and you recognize, and this is the permission for you to make a change, to recognize that it's okay if it feels scary and bumpy and hard. The best advice I can give you is to trust what you know to be true and to stand in faith, because fear is the opposite of faith. And when we fear, we manifest more difficulties and more fear. But when we step into faith and we can surrender and say, I don't know how this is going to go, I just know it's the right thing to do. And you walk forward into that. It's almost like, I don't know if you ever saw The Goonies. That was one of my favorite movies as a kid. There's a moment in The Goonies where they have to walk. And as they walk, literally like a plank shows up invisibly underneath their feet. And often I think this journey for me has been like that, where it's like, okay, I have to step forward, but I don't see the stair. Is something going to be under there? And then over time, it's like, oh, it always is there. That safety net has always been there. And so sometimes it's just the one thing, the one step, and allow yourself to just move one step at a time. And you'll begin to see that it can be way easier than you believe it can be.
Yes, it shows up. So the manifestation is focusing on the what and the how in your prayer and your meditation, your connection with your higher power, and focusing on the what and the why and in your requests. It's all biblical. Ask and you shall receive, and letting go of the when and the how and the who, right? But at the same time, like in the Goonies, like taking the steps, taking the inspired action. Ask your teams. I say team because I believe we have angels and guides. Just ask, just show me the next steps. Just show me the next steps. And then when you get inspired to make that phone call or to visit that attorney or go look at that new house or whatever it is, or go to a new interview or check out a company, take that action when you feel that inspiration. And I'm going to piggyback on that scary thing, because I think there's excitement and fear, there's a line there. But if it excites you, like if there's a piece that feels liberating, the scare is a good thing because that's part of what propels you into it. And it's just because you're human. But if there's a little bit of excitement towards a liberation, that's your cue that it's the right step for you. And know that you are being divinely supported. God's not going to bring that desire through you to not help you to the other side. Period. He's not going to do it. You're not going to be alone. There are so many people waiting to help you. And we're in these communities or these bubbles when we are kind of stuck in situations, and you can't imagine, again, the people that are waiting out there, but you have actually a whole support network that you haven't even met yet. The people that also left their big corporate job to become a coach or to start their brick and mortar or to start a makeup line or whatever, or left their marriage. And now, I mean, they will find you. You're going to be like, like moth to a flame. So just know that support network will come up. And I love that you said invest in yourself, because it just is key. You were not meant to do this alone. And investing in yourself is super, super important. Going to retreat, getting a coach, getting a therapist, whatever it is that you need, ask that you find the right person, and then trust when you walk in that office that if it's the right fit, that is going to accelerate your process. You were not meant to do it by yourself. And I love that you said the piece about if you don't believe everything's right, then you're not actually believing in God's plan. I mean, what if everything was perfect? And I'm always returning to that with me and with all my clients. And it's so simple, but what if everything was perfect just as it is? Everything that's happening is unfolding in perfect timing for you. Nothing was out of order. Nothing is wrong or right. Okay. None of the choices were wrong or right. They were all part of your soul's journey. And then when you're confused about it, just stop for a minute and just say, what has this been here to teach me? You're never being punished. You're never being punished. Okay. God is not a punishing God. I don't believe that. I believe you're always being guided and supported. What is this here to teach me? And very often, we're going to drive it home even more. It's self-love. Very often it is, and I'm finding this with myself, and I found it literally with every strong woman that I've worked with. It is choosing your choice over what everyone is expecting you. And the basis of that is self-love, which is God going through you, which is you honoring, I have this desire, this divine desire, because God placed it on my heart. It's what I was born in my DNA with. If I don't honor it, I'm not honoring God within me. So let me honor this, so then I can go into the world and be the best light, because your light gets bigger. Then you're the biggest light for others. You're the biggest light for your future employees, your future partner, your kids, your current partner. And that's what makes you expand into your potential, which is limitless in this life. So yeah, your light. We want your light to grow brighter.
So good. I literally cannot add anything to it. And here we are already out of time. It was such a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your journey, your perspective. This was probably one of the most chock full of value podcasts I've had. And so for those of you listening, I might encourage you, come back in a month or 6 months and listen to this one again.
Yeah.
It will fit differently. You will gather something new from it. What we have shared on this podcast today, just one piece of it alone could change your life. And so thank you, Karin. Yeah. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to have you. And thank you guys for coming on and joining and listening. Until next time, have a great one.
Thanks so much.